Okay, my name is Mike Cucciarelli, and tonight I'll be talking about the black plexiglass table. First, I want to give a quick introduction of who I am. I started professional photography in 2010, and I've been addicted to all types, especially still life photography, and I'm in many groups associated with Professional Photographers of America. And tonight, we're going to talk about the black plexiglass table, where and sometimes you could just use, one strobe or one light with this. You could use two strobes in like a silver reflector. I'll talk about that later. And you could use maybe three strobes. You get a strobe for this, a strobe for the edges, but also a small strobe like a snoot for this light. And I have not entered these in any competition. Maybe someday I will, and these are, brand new images that I've worked on. Today's agenda, of course, is going to be the black plexiglass table, and I'm going to talk about how to use, a simple lighting modifier with and without adding more strobes. You could have more light with just like a modifier, like a white card, a silver card, and I recommend that first to make the light more natural. And then I'll talk about the camera settings. I'll talk about other equipment that I use. I'll talk about other homemade equipment that I use. And then I'll talk about the camera settings. And I'll have a demo in Adobe Camera Raw, and also a demo in Photoshop with actions, blend modes, filters, and adjustment layers. I use actions differently where you group them together. And I like to just use them in button mode where you click on a button and I have actions, I call it actions. So if you have any questions, you can always email me at mpucciarelliart2016@gmail.com. And please stop me if you have any questions. I'm going to check the chat to see if anyone came in late. Looks like there's no question in the chat. Okay. These are all the tables that I use. And tonight we're going to be focusing on this table, the black plexiglass table. And I'll talk about how you use scrims differently from this table than the white plexi table, also a regular table or a small table. This is the lighting modifier page I created. You can use this with any table, and that includes the black plexi table. If you want to add light in a dramatic way, I'd recommend a mirror or a silver card or a silver reflector. If you want to add light in a soft way, you could use like a white reflector or white card. And these modifiers are great for adding fill light, adding more details in a shadow instead of using another strobe. And then they're black cards. They're great for taking out glares. Some people call them minus cards. And black cards are great when a strobe bleeds or gives out too much light. You use a black card to modify the light and you get the shot you like. Plastic fusion scrims, there are many ways to use them with this black place table, and I'll talk about that later in the presentation. I'll talk about how I make them. And then there's colorful gels where you can change the color of the backgrounds, also the color of the subject. Then there's medium-sized white plexiglass sheets. You can put them in front of the strobe to soften the light. Many ways to use these small white plexiglass sheets. You can have it on a little stool to create a table, and I'll talk about that later in the presentation. And then there's Cinefill, where you have, this is like black aluminum foil, It's great for creating a snoot on a tight budget where you'd use spring clamps or duct tape to hold it on. Hi, thanks for coming in. I've already started. I'm going to record this. And then there's blinds for natural daylight if you want to.
Oh,
I've already started, but this is on a recording too. The blinds are great for angling the light, for controlling the ample light. And these bottom four, the spring clamps, your G clamps, they're great in all sizes. They're great for holding up stuff. And there's duct tape. This is great for like attaching like a gel to a strobe. You can do the same thing with clothespins. And a lot of this you could buy at a hardware store or an art store.
what are you talking about?
I'm talking about the black plexi table.
He just answered, yeah. Is that the loudest it goes?
Yes, told you. I'm great too.
So a lot of this you could buy at an art store or a hardware store. You could buy some of this at a drugstore like duct tape or clothespins. This is how I use one way to use a black plexi table, where there are many ways to use a scrim. I'll demonstrate that later. You could use one light, you could use two lights, you could use fill cards, white cards. And the ways you use a scrim, and this is at a 45-degree angle. And there are ways, like this is great for like jewelry laid flat on the table. But later I'll demonstrate how to use the scrim at a 90-degree angle. This is the 45-degree angle. You could have one light over here, and I'll show that in the next slide, but you could also have like white cards to add in light or silver cards. But sometimes you just need another light. And I'd recommend putting a light at the corner. You aim it at a 45-degree angle. You could use this corner. Or if you just want a bounce and fill light, I recommend a white card or a silver card. Sometimes you just may need a little light, and I'll talk about that later. This is how to use one light. And this light is perpendicular to the angle here. And the light will shine at the table. And this is like, again, this is great for like if you want to lay down a watch, something small. And the tricky thing is to make sure the light is aiming at the subject. You have to angle the camera. This is a way to use the black plex table with the scrim at a 90 degrees, where if something were glass, the light would shine right through. Now, if this were non-glass, you'd get a nice silhouette, and that's why we'd have a light here or a light here. Or you could also have, silver or white cards to bounce in light. I'm going to talk about how I use vignetting and non-vignetting in the next several slides, with the same degrees of 90 degrees. This is one way. I'm using the scrim at 90 degrees, and the light will shine right through the black plexiglass. If this were like a non-glass subject, I'd have to put a light at a corner. And the reason why I put the light at the corner, so I put contrast in the subject. You want to have a lighted part, and you also want to have a shadow to make the subject look interesting. And you can also put, silver or white cards on the side that bounce in light. And this is the same setup, but I decided to raise the light because I want to bring out this more. And you can modify the light in both the preceding slide and this slide by moving the light back. You can also power down the strobe. And this is glass. And this is like one strobe and back a, black foam board. This is another way to use the black plexi table. And if you want to make the light more intense, you move the glass up closer to you. But then if you want to make the light less intense, you move the glass closer to the black foam board. And this setup's great for like a glass subject. Now, if this were like a soda can, I would have to have like a small light. Or another way to do this, like that first photograph, is to have a nice big reflector. So when the light fires, light will bounce and bring light to the front part of like the subject if this were like a non-glass subject. This is another way with just one light. This is an Elecom strobe. This is like a white reflector. This is a big boom stand, like a weight of stones in a bag, holding it up. And you can have like white cards over here or silver cards to bounce in light. And there are also many ways to position this one light to get the effect that you like. And I recommend using, the bounce and fill light is, the silver or white cards. This is how to use two lights. If the screen's at a 45 degree angle or about, you have a backlight. If this were like a mug, this would be like a silhouette. And that's why I have a light here to bring out the details. You can also put like silver and white cards to bounce in light. A lot of times I use flash, but you can use continuous light where if you want to catch like a water reflection, I recommend using continuous light, not flash. I'm going to check the chat. No questions. This is another way to use, the scrims at a 90-degree angle. And I made the scrim from stretcher frames from Plaza Arts. And this plastic fusion material you can buy in rolls at BH. You have a background light. You also have a light coming at a 45-degree angle. And I use the 45-degree angle here is you want to make the light look two-dimensional with like a shadow. Make it look more interesting. So if this were the only light, this would be a silhouette, unless that's what you want, but I didn't. So that's why I had to add the light here. You can also have other lights by, putting like white or silver cards on the side. And that's also good for putting a light or filling in shadow details. And this, this is how I did the shot at the beginning when I showed you, where we have two strobes. It's coming at a 45-degree angle. And then I had a big reflector where the strobes would fire and it would light up the front part of the subject. This is also natural light. We have two strobes coming in. And you use these two strobes to bring out the edge. It's a little bit overblown, but what you would want to do is you want to angle the blinds. You would put maybe a scrim in front of the window to soften the light. This is three strobes. Strobe, a strobe, a strobe aiming here. And I know there's window light, but there's other ways to use strobes. And this is the background light, and this is the key light. And the window could serve as the key light too. So I just want to give a midsection summary is that when you have a strobe, use it. But if you get add light, with a white card in place of a strobe, that'll make the thing look more natural. I recommend using a white card in place of another strobe. Some people, they use too much flash, and that's why we have white cards, silver cards. Then sometimes you just have to use another light. But I'd recommend, using a white card or silver card. I'm also recording this too.
Is there no sound now?
And these are all you C or G clamps is to hold up the
Okay.
scrim.
Turn this sound off.
Yeah. I leave this meeting, okay?
Oh, but we can see better.
I'm gonna have to mute you because I'm
Yeah, but the sound is not good.
Just turn the sound on.
Wait.
Watch. I think they're hearing us.
gonna mute. I could unmute you too. This is how you use C or G clamps to hold up the screw at a 90-degree angle. You could with C or G clamps, you can do with spring clamps. You could also do with C or G with spring clamps over here. These are big spring clamps. You can do the same thing with very large C or G clamps. And these are the 3-inch, spring clamps. And you could do the same with you could do this with any type of, C or G clamps. This is like gel. These are clothespins holding the blue gel to the strobe. This is like a grid, and it has a different purpose than the regular strobe. It fires light at a very narrow way. Let me go to my chat. My voice is breaking up. I'm going to try. I'm going to ask that two people at the bottom, you can unmute, and if you have any questions. Okay. And this is where now I'm going to use scrim walls. And this is great for making the light of the strobe softer. And you can also have white cards to bounce in light. You can have the strobe here, or you can have the strobe here. Oh, I got the colored gels at Plaza Arts. They sell them. I recommend Plaza Arts. So you could have, there are many ways you could do the walls. You could have scrim walls, you could have white foam walls. You could have silver walls. You could have a strobe here, and when the strobe fires, it'll bounce in light. And then there are, black walls where if a strobe bleeds too much light, they'll control the light and the photograph will look better. It's great for taking out glares. I place the drells, I attach it to the strobe. I also, in the white, another table, I would, I would use many things to hold the gels over the light. These are the settings. This is the Canon settings. And I usually use aperture of 16. I always like to use ISO 100. The strobes are very powerful. And I like to start with 1/125th, and then you could sometimes have to cut the shutter in half, go to 2/50th. And I always shoot in manual mode, and I use bulb mode for light painting. And the standards is sharpest, and evaluated mode's great for contrast, and the autofocus mode is great for still life. It's also great for nature and wildlife, or maybe you could use Alservio for wildlife and sports. In the drive mode, I like to use single because I take one shot at a time. Then there's the zone autofocus and the 19-point AF. I like to use the zone autofocus because it's quicker, it's easier. Think about the 19-point AF. Sometimes the camera has to reset. And I've been more successful with the zone autofocus than the 19-point AF. But some people use the 19-point AF, they like it, but I prefer, to use the zone autofocus. This is the white balance. I recommend the daylight white balance and make it look natural. You can also change the Kelvin by adjusting it over here. You can change it to 5,500. And these are the other temperatures of the white balance. Then there's a custom white balance where you go to manual focus and you shoot a white card and you set the camera. But now if the light changes, then you have to do a new custom white balance. That's why I like to just have the temperature set at maybe 5,500 or 5,200. And I'll never use auto white balance because it's at least natural and you add an artificial color to the photograph. This is the color space page, and I always like to start in Adobe 1998, which is about 57 billion colors, and then convert it to sRGB. It's great for posting on the web, but that narrows it down to 16.7 million colors. Now, some people start with ProPhoto. It's 281 trillion colors, but some of those colors are not recognized by the human eye. But then when you convert it to printing, then you only have like 16,000 colors. But again, I always like to, start with Adobe 1998 and then convert to sRGB for web. And that's what I've been doing. Some people do things differently, but there's so much you can do with these color spaces, especially the ProPhoto RGB. And then the exposure bracketing, I just like to take it one step under regular and one step over because I have more details on all the files that I work with. And one stop is usually more easy to work with than two stops. Then there's a long exposure noise reduction. Some people don't like to use it with a properly exposed image. Most of the times I just use one. It won't hurt if you do. You don't have to, but two is great for correcting blue color casts. But today's DSLRs, they don't have this problem. But if you need the correct blue color cast, I recommend two. But a lot of times I just use one. But if you use two, something's always happens where it'll take longer to get back to original screen. That's why I just like to have it at one. Or you can have it at 0. And like I said, some people, they like to use 0 with a properly exposed photograph, but I like to use 1. Won't hurt if you use it or not. And then for ISO noise reduction, some people just like to use 0, but 1's good to use, 2's good to use, but it's better to use 0, 1, 2 than 3. Won't hurt if you use it. These are my strobes. These are my 2 strip boxes, and they fire light at a very narrow way. And these strobes on the side are twice as powerful as these two middle ones. But these two strobes in the middle have a different purpose than these. And these are Elechrome strobes. And these are my nod strobe lights or continuous lights. These are good floodlights. These are great for adding in light with natural light. And these are the Spider 5s, the Westcott 5 socket. And these switches control the lights. Then there's a 7 socket where you have 3 switches where you have a switch for this, a switch for this set, and a switch for that. This is also good for contrast. I have 2 of these, but I have 6 of these. But these are good for adding light in a nice contrast way. Get more contrast in a photograph. These are all my stands. I've been collecting stands for years, but I haven't bought a stand in a while. That's good. They're in concrete blocks. And other ways to use concrete blocks too, and I'll talk about that later. And these are like sandbags. Sometimes it comes with the boom stand. Sometimes you have to just buy like a bag at a hardware store. You can fill, these are filled with rocks, and they've been really useful to balance the stand. And in many types of stands, I have ground stands, I have big boom stands, I have medium-sized stands, I have medium-sized boom stands. These are my white reflectors and my silver reflectors. And if you want to bounce in light a soft way, I recommend using the white reflector. But if you want to bounce in light, use a silver reflector. And sometimes the silver reflector comes with a gold reflector, and it's great for putting like a yellowish tints in the photograph. It's great for portraits. These are my snoots. You want to make sure you use the grid to make the light more contrast. You just attach this to the strobe. You want to aim it at a 45-degree angle at the photograph for the best contrast. These are impact snoots. These are just simple crates. They're code for holding stuff. Sometimes vendors just like, they give these away if they don't need them. Sometimes you can find them on the side of the road, and I found one and I took it because it was just sitting there. Great for holding stuff, containing stuff. It's also great for putting a light beneath the table. And you do the same thing with a bucket. You could hold a scrim up. You do the same thing with these crates. And this is some homemade equipment. I made all these tables for doing still life, light painting. And you can do jewelry with these small things. This is like a homemade rack. I used to have this in a closet storing all the stands, but then I had a piece of wood to separate it. I decided to take out the piece of wood. I decided to turn this into like a holding rack where you could hold like a Muslim background. You can put this on a cube. And I'll talk about cubes later, but I decided to make better use of this, rack than storing the stands. It's great for, holding like a black background. And these are cubes. I got these at Target, and these are great for creating like a small table with the small black plexiglass sheet. You could also hold things up. You could just lay it on its side. You could put like the rack you saw here. You could lay this on the floor, and it can make the rack higher. This is a concrete block. This is great for storing stuff like the stands in the preceding photograph. But you could put like a foam board. It could hold up a foam board against a table. This is a great support. And these are stools. The problem is the arms are falling apart. And I decided to cut off the arms and I decided to turn it into a stool. And the same thing with this. These are nice stools to use. And this is great for holding up a light. You could also you could have a miniature table with both of these with like a small piece of foam board or a small piece of black plexiglass. These are all my lenses. These are all my prime lenses. I use these most. Sometimes use with 7200, which is zoom. My Canon 100 to 400 is my outdoor wildlife lens, and I like the prime lens because they're sharper and they're cheaper in price. These are my Canons I use. And eventually I'm going to switch to the mirrorless, but I'm not doing that right now. And this is an image stabilization. Canon calls it this. Nikon calls it vibrant reduction, where if you use a tripod, turn it off. And if you don't use a tripod, turn it on, because if you don't use it correctly, the image may not process correctly. You can mess up the pixels. You may have color shift problems. It's better to use this, like turn it on without a tripod, turn it off when you use a tripod. I like to use autofocus to AF for outdoor lighting. And I like to do manual focus with light painting or for focus stacking, where you do a quick pre-focus, you have it at AF, and if you see what you like, you switch it to manual focus. When you do light painting, or if you just want to use manual focus, it's easier on the sensor. These are my tripods. This is my architect tripod, my landscape. I did cut out this part to make it so you can put it on the ground. I could also use this with still life too. I like to use, I said, 100 of ISO or 200 with the tripod, but without a tripod, I may have to go to 600, 3200. And I like to use a cable release all the time for my still life and also my light painting. And sometimes I can't just use like a firm press on the shutter, but a lot of times I like to use the cable release because the camera is a lot more still. And this is my camera stands. This is great for my still life. And you can also put like a weight of those bags. You can make it more sturdy. And again, I like to use a cable release, like I said before, or you can do a firm shutter. And I use the same ISOs, like I said before. I like to just try to use ISO 100 when I use the strobes. And this is my cable release. And I've used this for years, or you could have a firm press on the shutter. But I would also recommend a remote cable release, but you want to make sure that the instructions, you want to be comfortable with what you're using. You can even use your cell phone as a type of release with technology advancing today. And then I have still life, this is a must-have for a black plexi table, where a lot of times it is used a good shine with just one. 2 is for light scratches, 3 is for heavy scratches. A lot of times I just use 1, but if you have scratches, use 2 or 3. You can buy this at any auto store or any website. Now the black plexi table, you're going to be using this a lot to blow off the dust. This is like a lens blower, because it drives every person who uses the black plexi table crazy, the little dust spots. That's why you got to blow the table. You got to clean the table with probably Novus 1 with the lint cloth. Then when you're shooting, that dust will fall on the table, and that's why you got to blow it off with one of this, a tweezer or a lens blower. These are my lighting modifiers look like. These are like mirror plates. You can buy these at CVS. These mirror plates were part of a mirror, but they started falling out. So then I took out the mirror plate. I still have the mirror frame, but I decided to put these mirror plates to good use. And these are armature clips to hold these up. This is what duct tape looks like. You can buy this at any retail store. This is armature wire. This is great for holding stuff. These are my CRG clamps. They're good in all sizes. We talked about how I could hold things. We talked about spring clamps, clothespins. I have many of these, many of these. And these are gels, and you can buy this at, Plaza Arts. You can also order this on Amazon or an online art store. And these are, silver cards. These are great for adding in light without a strobe. Great for adding in fill light. Put these like an armature black clip to the preceding screen. The same thing with these gold cards, but you have a yellowish tint, and some people like this with portraits. This is Cinefill. This is great for creating a snoot with like small spring clamps or duct tape. This is like draft paper. It's great for plastic fusion. It's great for softening the light on the strobe. These are stretcher frames. You buy these at Plaza Arts, and you can buy drafting paper at Plaza Arts. You can also go online and order the plastic fusion paper. You can also buy like the frames already made at Target or a frame store. And this is, the plexiglass sheets. You have like the clear plexiglass sheet. It's great if you want to do food. You could have like a white background on the floor. You can even have a light facing up, and then the food would appear in a floating motion. And you have white plexi sheets, and these are great for softening the light on the strobe. And you have black. It's great for creating like a small still life table on a stool. These are my white cards. This is great for creating like a white backgrounds. You can also create a gray ground depending on how you use the light. You can also bounce in light. And black cards are great, of course, for a dark background. But you can create like a light background depending on how you use the light. And black cards are great for, taking out glares in a photograph or helping the strobe when it bleeds too much light. Now I'm going to do an Adobe demo of Adobe Camera Raw. So what I do is I go through all the raw files and pick out the best one, and then I put it in here. I do that for every time I use for every shot. So I'm going to start all over. I'm going to open in Camera Raw, or you could do Control or Command R, or you can right click. I'm going to reset the default. I'm going to click Done. Then I'm going to just open in Camera Raw, Command and Control R. First, I want to try to set the white balance, try to find a neutral or gray. And just work your way down. I think these highlights are too powerful. I think these shadows, I want to increase the clarity, I want to increase the texture. And I want to put like more detail. Try to do like an S curve. I want to use over 140 with product. I want to use 50 for my noise reduction. I want to try to slightly increase the noise, color noise reduction. I'm not going to touch a color mixer. I'm not going to touch a color grading. I'm going to remove chromatic aberration. I'm going to use profile connections. And I'm using my Canon. This is a lens, 85 millimeter. I'm going to use this. It automatically corrects the distortion. Now the light is a little uneven, so I'm going to do like effects to make the light even. Then I'm going to click Done. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Again, I pick out the best file. The star means I did Control 5. Then I copy it in here. I'm going to edit. Let's see. Opening Camera Raw, you can do Control or Command R. I'm also going to reset to default. And I click Done. I'm going to do Control R, Control or Command R. I'm going to do white. I'm going to try to set the white balance. I'm going to try to find a gray. I want to look at the image. Increase the contrast. I think the highlights are way too powerful. Increase the texture. Maybe more details here. I'm going to have like an S curve. Use 50 for my noise reduction. I'm going to slightly increase the color noise. I'm not going to cut the color mixer. This is worth experimenting. You can do highlights, midtones. We're not going to touch that. I'm going to remove chromatic aberrations. I'm going to use profile corrections. And it tells everything about the camera and lens. I'm going to correct this. And the lighting is slightly uneven, so what I'm going to do, I'll try to make it a little more even. Again, in this file here, it's Control-5 is the best one that I like. Then I copy the files in here. You do Control or Command-R. You can do right-click. Then I'm going to reset. I'm going to right-click, or you can do Control or Command-R. Try to find a gray and try to neutralize the photograph. I'm looking at this image. I think the highlights are too powerful. I want to bring more details in the shadow. I want to increase my texture. I want to increase my clarity. Just skip over the optics. Go to my geometry. And the lighting is even, so I'm not gonna use them vignetting. But you can do all sorts. You can do like this. Put a little vignetting to it. We can do that. Now I'm going to go to Adobe Photoshop. And I'm going to open up those images. I'm going to run some actions. I'm going to run an action. I click the button. This is an action. This is an action. This is an action. And these two small, this action is grouped. I'm going to invert it, but I can do in Control-I. What I'm going to do is I'm going to burn in more detail using a luminosity blend mode. You know, white reveals, black hides. Then I'm going to dodge. I'm going to bring the lighted parts out more. I'm going to do that with the screen blend mode. And in many ways, you use this action where some people just, you know, they burn in more details in a shadow, and then they dodge in more light detail in the lighted areas. I'm using a white watermark because it stands out better than black. Okay, thanks. Glad you liked it. It's on the recording. Now there's many ways you can, what you can do is you could use this layer mask. And sometimes you can use a brush, but you could use like a multiply blend mode, and you can use a 25% to bring out the detail. But now there's ways to bring the color out quickly. When I make the photo white more quicker, makes the feather black more quicker. And then there's a, frequency separation. Where, this is a high frequency. This is a layer good for cloning and stuff. Now, when you use this action, I'm going to do Control Z to back up. You want to make sure this is not checked. If this were a regular layer, then you would check it, but this is a little different. So I like to do Shift F5. I'm going to use content aware. I recommend trying it on both. Some people, what they do is they have a layer for every cloning material here. I like to put everything in one layer. There's another way you can do. I'm going to do a background. I'm going to select this subject. I can do it like, let's see. I could do object selection. You'd also do the same thing with select subject. And I'm going to do inverse because I'm going to also turn this into a smart object. And then I'm going to put a Gaussian blur. And that's another way to take out the parts you don't want to see. And I'm doing, it's non-destructive editing. So if you don't want to use layer, you disable, but I do. Suppose I want to put a black frame. So the longest side, which is the height, is 4,000. It's automatically set, and it's already set in the action. I want to talk about my actions. When I click on buttons, many actions are called. Like when you see play action, it calls another action. It calls many actions. And I also, this is an action, but this is really doing two things. It's calling these other two actions. So when I click buttons, I call several actions at one right after the other. See, play action, and then I did this many ways. I could use the unfade. I could use the high pass, and these are all actions. Now I'm going to go to button mode. When I click on that button, these three actions, this is what I last did. And then when I export preferences, quality 100, ask every time we're export. I convert to sRGB. So when I do an export, do quick export. And I'm not going to save any changes. I'm going to go to another file. So I'm going to go here. See, all the settings I made are there. All the settings are there. So I'm going to try to make this a little more lighter. I'm going to go to Effects. There. And now we got that to worry about, but run some actions. Now, what I'm also going to do is I'm also going to make a backup copy. I'm going to do this. I'm going to turn this into a smart object because I do not like this light, this circular light here. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to go to camera filter. That's non-destructive editing. I'm going to do my layer. I'm going to need my signature down here. I'm going to just, let's see. Actually, I'm going to take that out. I'm going to put in a vignette up here. But the light's slightly uneven, but you do the best you can do. And this is also, it's slightly slanted. So I'm going to go, there we go. You could also, you know, we could do Control A, Control T, Control T. See, I'm on the wrong layer. Oh. Could also make it straight. I'm going to clear my guides. And I just may use a regular layer to clone. I want to make, now I want to have this checked and make my thing smaller. But invert it by doing Control I. So I'm going to burn in more shadow detail at a luminosity blend mode. So I'm painting in white. I want to bring in more detail. White reveals. Then I want to dodge. I want to bring in more lighted areas at a screen blend mode. Then Trying to make the photo more white, I'd use this bottom dropper. I'll do Control Z to take back the change. And this will make the photograph more black. If you want to adjust the contrast, use the middle slider to the levels. I'm gonna do my actions where so I just, I want to click on those buttons. All these actions are called one right after the other. I'll put a black flame on. And there are ways, you can, like this. I'm going to put this selection in a layer mask and, levels. And if I want to just, play around with blend modes, so those ways you can use blend modes to get what you want. And again, oops. What I call it actions. Like these actions are defined elsewhere. It calls one right after the other. All I do is click buttons. I'm not going to save any changes, so I'm going to open up the last one. I'm going to click done. I'm going to open up again. Whoops. Say open. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to, run some actions. And over here, so I just, Control I, Control I. So basically, I'm burning in everything. Yeah, I'm burning in everything that I want to see. In the luminosity of blend mode, opacity 100. I'm going to do the dodge, but I'm doing a screen blend mode. I'll make the photograph more dark. then if I were to, what I'm going to do, get the signature down here. I duplicate this layer. I'm also going to turn this into a smart object. I'm going to do blur. Actually, I'm going to say just select subject. I'm going to do select inverse because I want to select everything outside the subject. And then I do this is put a blur. Another way to get rid of specks with the blur. And then I want to do my other actions. I did the frame, I showed you the actions. So since the height is bigger, I have this as an action. I'll make the height 4,000, which is the portrait mode. If you're in landscape mode, then the width would be 4,000. And it's set to 200 pixels per inch resolution. And then I talked about my export preferences, where JPEG quality is 100. Ask every time I want to export it. I also do copy of my copyright in my copyright stuff. And then since I'm posting to the web, I use convert to sRGB. I'm not going to save any changes. Don't see any question in the chat. These are all my Facebook groups. The one with the least amount of people is dramatic product photography. If you want to post a headshot, you can feel free to post in here, or a product shot. Sculpting a light, I'm helping run with someone. This is great for light painting. This is great for any type of fine art, display gallery. This is my architect group. And my still life fine art is my biggest group, and it's growing every day. And you can post any type of still life fine art in this group. Here are my business links. My Facebook, my Instagram, which is Michael Pucciarelli. Feel free to follow me. My Google, my LinkedIn, my Twitter, my fine art website, and my portfolio. So any questions? So feel free to join my club, my Facebook groups. Just email me any questions. And I am going to have this as a recording. And so I don't think there are any questions. So I think I'll just end it.